Welcome, everybody. My name is Henry Lieberman. I'm research scientist here at CSAIL, and I'm happy to welcome back a homeboy, Ted Selker. So Ted was he was a professor for almost 10 years, was it, right, at the MIT Media Lab, where he had a group called Context-Aware Computing. And Ted and I go way back decades, back to before I worked at the Media Lab, I worked here at when CSAIL was the MIT AI Lab. And and Ted visited a number of times during that period. So Ted has a long history with MIT. He also was an IBM Fellow, which is the highest technical honor that IBM gives to its research scientists, and he invented the track point, which is the little rubber eraser pointing device in the middle of the ThinkPad laptops. He did a Coach, which was one of the very early and still seminal intelligent tutoring systems, and he's had he's great at engineering and fixing things. So I think, you know, Ted is one of these Renaissance people who has a lot of skills and a lot of very wide range of interests in cognitive science and AI and all sorts, and user interface. So today he's going to tell us about Alphy, which is a social network for women that has some AI smarts in it to give feedback to the participants. So take it away, Ted.
Well, thank you, Henry. Kind of an interesting question to me is how can we make better social media? So what's really nice when I ran into Julian Guthrie, the founder of Alphy, was her goal was to make a community that was going to be supportive of women. And it does that by giving information, inspiration, and community support for women. And in meeting her, she's incredible content creator, best-selling author. But I really believe that that we've had a problem for a while now with people going dramatic and not recognizing their communication intention and not knowing how to fix that. The big companies have been struggling. So this seemed like a really gigantic opportunity. And so what we're going to talk about today is not the whole system, although I'm going to take a minute and 18 seconds for you to see a little blurb about Alphy. Alphy was launched last week. And you see, it's really brand new, that you can go and get it online, get it on your phones, and download it if you're a woman. If you're not, look at the website, and at some point we'll maybe include men. So I'm just going to go to the video.
Alphy is a revolutionary app designed for advancing women. It's about career advancement, deeper connections and belonging, and better communication. It connects women within your company and to like-minded women across the globe, helping them learn valuable skills while delivering the stories of incredible trailblazers to provide daily insight and inspiration.
I've coached some of the best athletes in the world, and again, to think about what they do that's different maybe from the average athlete. Leaders are people that want to make others around them better.
When you get Alphy for your business, you're getting much more than your current collection of hiring, education, and DEI solutions can provide. You're getting Equal Tech, DEI 2.0. Find qualified candidates by posting job opportunities to our diverse community and connecting to a new pool of female talent. Dramatically improve your employees' communication skills with our patent pending. Pending AI technology. Upskill your team through curated and guided learning tracks on topics including bravery, working moms, communication, burnout remedies, and much more. Alfie also believes in the importance of fun delivered through our original games, events, and groups. Alfie helps the women at your company flourish and in turn increases productivity and employee retention. Alfie is a new and better way for you to recruit, retain, and advance women, maximizing corporate.
We don't need to.
Alfie is a rep.
Technology is inevitably used for social purposes. And this talk is going to go through kind of these five different segments. Just for fun, I've the index I've put on the right, a dashboard also that Alfie gives you that tells you how you're doing. What is the tone that you're presenting to the world in all of your comments, and you can go and look at all the comments you've had, and a lot of other things. There's one of the fun things in terms of just keeping track of how things are going when you're in Alfie is this flower, and the flower is these are 4 different traits that we aspire to, and so instead of saying you like something, you say this is optimistic. So that's a fun little thing that we put in there. But what I want to start off is how can AI help human interaction? That's human community interaction. And so we've been using AI for everything, all the way up to we even scheduled Muzak with it now. And in the beginning, you know, it was investment opportunities in the 80s, and DE shot it really well, and online searches in the 90s. And we really all got really enjoyed a lot of the stuff that started from Brewster Kahle and then ended up on the web. E-commerce in 2000 and car safety, but really that car safety is all about the car in the world. And the car safety that I kind of played with was that 10% of all fatalities are caused by people being distracted by their phone. And so we made a bunch of biometric and AI feedback systems that you can read about in this paper, where we were literally able to stop people from being cognitively overloaded in time to stop them from crashing. So this AI can really do stuff even about the people. Even in every meeting, we find ourselves with disruption and frustration. And you know, whenever somebody comes into the meeting and it says, Ted Selker has entered the meeting, it turns out, I'll show you later, that we've done experiments to show that actually adds unnecessary cognitive load, increasing communication errors. So, you know, the world of automated analytics needs considerate systems, and a considerate system is going to be context aware. It's going to know what you're doing and where, and it's going to use sensors and AI modeling. And we have just such a great quiver of tools now for modeling, and all the way from these transformers to neural nets down to the rule-based stuff. And what I'm surprised by is even today, even the fanciest AI systems are actually using many of these, not all of these, but many of them, and often using some of the old AI as well. The fact is that really anything that we do with a person is only helpful when it's socially appropriate. And we know that by knowing some autistic people and the struggles they go through, of course. But the question is, when should it be social responses? Actually, that's the only thing that people respond to. And the question is, can AI help with human machine empathy? So this is just a big list, a laundry list, if you will, of different kinds of systems that have tried to build community. And you'll see the red labels on some of them where, you know, email begat the term flaming, which is basically people being overly dramatic when they are communicating with email. And it started in the 70s. Bulletin boards, the first time I was showing technology to Lou Gerstner, the CEO of IBM, he was being shown also a bulletin board. He gets on this bulletin board, he types in, "Hi, I'm Lou." And what comes back is, "Hey, Lou, want a screw?" So people, you know, they start off dramatic when they don't have any other way to connect. And so it's really, the question is, how do we let people matter without giving them these desires to stand out that have nothing to do with anything valuable. And so that's what all the green ones on this page are. And we could spend all day talking about the history of community building tools. And I love to do it. We can talk about it more later, but I think I want to, just in the interest of time, not go through all of these. Except that one of the things I actually am proud of in Alphy is Alphy Recommend, which is not going to be talked about much more today. But when you go on to Alphy, it recognizes and learns about you. And we do something much fancier than collaborative filtering, and we have really interesting ways of telling you why something has been suggested to you, and also we have a sense of a short-term memory. Something that you're doing right now is not necessarily that you want to think about bodybuilding for the next 18 weeks, like some of the recommended systems do. So the main question is going to stuff we're going to talk about has to do with Alphy Reflect, and it's about how people will interpret your contribution. That's what we're going to be thinking about. So before you make a fool of yourself, we're going to be thinking about how do you know whether you're going to do that. And so now I'm going to talk a little bit about social actors. So when we're out in the world and we're interacting with a computer or a person, there's this intentional stance and there's awareness. And if you think about what you see when you're talking to a person, you've got the posture, you've got the height, the mutual gaze, the vocal behavior, and all of these things that really contribute to getting a feeling for what is going on in this relationship. And to understand all of that, we'd have to understand all of this stuff. But in fact, we don't have to understand all of it. We have to understand what is a reasonable, effective response. And so if you think about a host at a restaurant, do they have to know all about you? Basically, what they have to know is that it's okay to let you in and give you a nice smile and make you feel welcomed. And so the modeling doesn't have to go completely as deeply as people sometimes worry. But there is a social signal we have to pay attention to. And basically, the point is that our actions do inform and negotiate relationship. And it can be our gestures, it can be things we say, it can be just that we're waiting back for other people to take the lead on something. And so the question, how to make a considerate system, a system that will be socially responsible and responsive, has to do with appropriate social feedback using AI models to situate social context to the user. I'm going to get rid of Carol sheets. So the real goal then is to reduce cognitive and effective load that is not necessary for what you're doing through pertinent and valuable commentary, thoughtful and caring, receptive and reciprocal, not distracting and disruptive, condescending, or hostile and manipulative. And you're going to see me revisit these topics again. So when should I, bring this considerate feedback? Well, I'm talking, I'm doing, I'm thinking. The question is, what is the timing also? And you're going to see a piece of research in a moment where we really just changed the timing of feedback, made huge difference in people's productivity. How? We have to think about what are the rules of engagement. Affirmations and listening are the sense of listening is something that we don't know if that's for me. Why? Well, appropriate response is fundamental to social success. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about kinds of support for human interaction. And I've made lots and lots of explorations into ways of interacting with people in the world using some AI to improve things. And what we're going to focus on today, though, is mostly this one in the top left corner. This is a response system that actually we published a long time ago. In fact, Henry Lieberman was a co-author on this paper that started this whole work for me. And just to give you a very simple example, Andrea Lockhart here, now a full professor at University of Boston, was one of my students, and she went around Harvard Square videotaping and what we've discovered, trying to figure out when to automatically choose things that she'd videotaped that were important, was that the galvanic skin response for her reaction, not very good. But her vocalization, she would make a characteristic little giggle whenever she was taking videos of things that she really wanted, that she really believed were important. And there were 4 times, you can see these smiley faces. There were these several times when we were appropriately able to choose by her expressed intentions when to edit. This is another example in another domain where we were able to improve people's communication by having an AI inject just a little something. So if you see this graph up at the left top, this person was really dominant, this green person. And then we said something, and then they dropped down to 40% and stayed at 40% for the rest of the experiment. They're doing some chess game. So I'll just listen to what we said to them.
Turn taking.
That's all we said. And what we found was when we had longer statements than that, it didn't work as well. This person that was red, that wasn't communicating or doing anything, when they increased their engagement in this interaction a lot, over 30%, when we said,
Any thoughts?
and it stayed up above 20% the rest of the experiment. So there's a whole lot of these. One of the fun ones that's that I enjoy is, you have the audio conference calling systems that will announce somebody like this.
John has entered the meeting.
Okay, and when we replace that with
John.
And when he leaves the meeting, we replace it with, listen to this.
John.
That little upswing, people were more aware of who was in the meeting, and it reduced communication errors by almost a half. So that was kind of an amazing, simple example. And I have a bunch of them, but anyway, there's some papers on this topic, and I'm proud of that work. But the only point is that these short things were valuable. Another place that work went was into something called C3.chat. It's a free video conferencing calling system I built. And what you'll see on those bars is you can see that Mr. Purple has been talking a lot in the more recently than Mr. Green. So it makes people aware of their interaction. So these are all little schemes that I'm trying to come up with for improving human communication with a little bit of AI. And a final example before we go back to reflect is this PhD thesis by Ernesto Arroyo when he was my student, where we literally took text messages while people are doing this Windows background you see with all those windows open. That's a really complicated task they had to do. They had to like fill out orders, and they had to do some spreadsheet thing, and they were getting in new ideas of what was in stock, and pricing was changing. And in the middle of that, they were getting text messages, and text messages were alerting to them to that. And some of them were social text messages. And what we did is, just by not putting up text messages while they were focusing and concentrating and typing and opening windows, but and also recognizing which text messages maybe want to be grouped with other ones in a 2-minute period, just sliding them around a little bit in a 2-minute period, we were able to get them 25% more work done. And when we said, hey, okay, just try to see how many less, be really careful with your work, 30% fewer errors. So just by rearranging, just by having some AI rearrange when not to disrupt a person. Okay, so we did all this work in email also, and there's this one off to the right, which is another thesis that color coded why you would respond to these emails. But the one that's really interesting, it's so simple, is while you're typing, and this could be you're typing anything, maybe you should be aware of how that will be perceived by somebody else. And what we found in this example, in Empathy Buddy, as we call it, is that when we had text over here, people didn't really look at the text, but when we put this funky little ugly, poorly drawn face over there that looked like it's surprised because I went skydiving last night outside New York, surprise. Then people actually reviewed and modified their text when appropriate more. So that was really interesting. And so there's really this question of when should you and can you appropriately make these responses. My first inkling that this was important was when I had a bunch of students making a adaptive help system a long time ago. And out of the 30 versions, the only ones that anyone could stand using were ones that responded instantly. It was much more important than getting things right. When I was making adaptive help, I found that when I had too many ways and reasons to respond to people, people got confused. Reducing them, even though maybe it didn't have as much coverage of the different situations, actually made it improve. With this pointing device that I have an example on my collar, we found out that when we used AI, the big danger was a person would adapt to the system, adapting to them. And this getting out of phase is always a danger when something is changing in response to you. And I guess there's a bunch of literature I want to call our attention to also that says that back when people in the Nokia took the side tone out of the telephones. So for a little while, there were cell phones that you didn't hear what you were saying. And when you can't hear what you're saying, you get louder and more stressed. And the same thing goes, there's some nice pieces of work that show that if you see another person while you're talking to them, you also reduce your stress. Maybe that's why we like the video conference calls. But the point being that the feedback of communication, there's lots of papers saying that feedback while you're communicating helps you communicate. So people have done a lot of different things to support communication while people are doing things. And a system called PEDIT, done by a guy named George Heidorn in the early 80s at IBM, would underline words that were misspelled and try to help you figure out what to do. He actually went to Microsoft and put that into Word. That's where you find those suggestions. Gmail and Emacs, they do text completion. Here's thank you for the invitation was put into my thing. And I'm going to say a little bit more about these things as we go along. But Clippy danced around on the screen and took your attention away from what you were doing. And that is why I believe Clippy was most unsuccessful, was that there's 2 or 3 reasons, but that was one of them, is that it took your attention away from what you were doing. Coach is a system I built that that went into OS2 for still actually available. And what you see is it's covering all of the yucky, scary parts of this interface and highlighting the one that it wants you to think of using. And that actually made a big improvement for people's ability to find things and do things. So focusing people's attention on what they were doing, not taking it away from it. Silly idea, but it works. And then now the last thing I want to talk about, and we're going to talk more and more about it, is Alphy Reflect. We use faces, iconic symbols, and short text to make you recognize many different ways of interpret that your text might be interpreted. So unlike the simple thing in Empathy Buddy we saw a few minutes ago, this is the very sophisticated AI system with a lot of different things going on. So we're going to talk about Empathy Buddy begetting Alphy Reflect, and I guess I want to start off by saying, so many great tools out there like Grammarly and all these other ones will try to help you with legibility. And all I know is all the professional writers that I know turn it off because it's distracting. And in fact, they know that stuff. And in fact, often what they find themselves doing is having a discord with what the system is trying to tell them to do. And that's really a big danger. And so as we're looking to respond to people for social purposes, I start thinking about tone and sentiment and semantics. And so, these are just some things I typed into a comment I was making on Alphy. And later on, if you guys want, we can play with it real time. It's definitely not just some slideware. And I said, this is great. It put up a smile and said positive. I said, it's a perfect way to think about this. And it put up the hands, clasps, deferent. And this is a hot topic. It put up this kind of neutral but positive look. So that's the topic is, of course, back to semantics. So these are kind of some ways it looked. And what's really fun is to go back and look at how this progressed. So there's a lot of AI. We use machine learning. We use big language models, bidirectional transformers, and everything good. But how you present it to people, I'm just going to keep saying, is super critical. And we started off with this stuff on the left. Look at how scary this poor little, very cute guy looks. Women are not inspiring. Too edgy. It's a challenge, right? And now we say things like inclusive, and we show a picture of a male and a female symbol together. And the point is, we're pushing you towards maybe the direction you want to go, as opposed to blaming and shaming and complaining, right? So, do you want to be inclusive? This job is too old for you, or you're too old for this job. Now we have a young woman and an old woman holding hands, and we say choose ability, not age. So we're kind of encouraging you to think about, well, what are the standards of society and social responsibility and response? And am I making sense? It's a very simple. This is clear. Okay, so these now along the way, it's amazing what you think of, what bad ideas we come up with. So we had this great idea of having the equality of men and women, like the first top right one. But so we put these women and men, and who wants their head on a platter? So I mean, it's just and look at those colors. It's a dangerous looking situation, right? So we really didn't want that, and we slowly got to just using that symbol of men and women together. And this is kind of what the app looks like a little bit on the left. We're commenting in this case on an article, a special report article, and thinking about one of the responses you saw last. But finally, I just want to make sure that we kind of go over so many things that we learned while doing this. Okay, and so what is the trajectory for AI in supporting humans? And we've used knowledge engineering to drive factories and configurations and computers and linguistic models that broke at the edges. I don't know if you realize, but some of those audio systems use old AI models, knowledge engineered ones, and other ones use machine learning. And you're going to see more and more these machine learning ones actually succeeding. Medical models, logistical models. So I want to give you an example of how interactive can be more important than quality. So there was a system called AALPS back in 1980, by the way, and it was to fill airplanes with equipment. Okay, and there existed already a simulation that could fill the airplanes with equipment. You'd have a whole inventory of equipment, and it would go and put them onto the airplanes, and then put them on in whatever direction, whatever way you were going to take it off the airplane, including they'd come out back of the airplane with parachutes, whatever. And no one used it because it took 3 hours to run this program. And what people are used to doing is sitting around a table for 12 hours, 18 people, shuffling little pieces of paper. And they kept doing that instead of use the simulation. Out came the AALPS, and what it did is in less than a minute, it would make a cheap and dirty configuration of where things should go in the airplane. And then you would move them around a little bit by hand, ones you didn't like. You want the heavy things under the wings, you want the things you want to get out first at the back, all that stuff. And it took off. It turns out in the military, they had several hundred places that started using this configuration system because it was interactive and there was support for changing things. Okay, so So what we don't want is we don't want to make brittle models that run out of power theoretically and practically, like trying to build a gigantic model of everything that has to do with the Suez Canal, which Psych did. Psych is this beautiful piece of work that's been worked on for, I guess, 40 years now, that really pushed all of the limits of knowledge representation. And the problem you get up against is Gödel's theorem, which says that you can't be, that you end up with inconsistencies that cannot be gotten rid of. So the question is, how do we make hybrid things that become more and more accurate, more and more reasonable, and are interactively improving, right? And that's where we ended up with these multi-layered networks that saved us. But the bandwagon of data proceeds, right? Big data, everybody says, is going to solve all our problems. Still, it turns out that what I discovered in making Alphy Reflect is that the same thing that I always learned: representation matters. And you spend all of your time trying to understand what it is that you're modeling in order to model it, even though you pretend that it's all big data. John Lamping, that worked on the machine learning with Greg Hinton, that says you have to eyeball it first. He had a big talk about that. So, so I think that what is required for any of us to succeed is to build up our expertise in the field. So Alphy Reflect has been much and very much and all about learning more by building and trying. So just an example of something that we didn't think of, but we came up with later, is we thought, okay, if somebody's talking about, racial things, we better be careful. Maybe they're being racist. Well, maybe we can distinguish, the Black Lives Matters, march from your blah, 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 blah. So racial and racist are different. We used to think that, anytime that you said something about, I'm sorry, that was an apology. And then we started thinking, well, actually, I'm sorry for your loss. That's not an apology. That's empathy. And so we really have to start distinguishing, and we have to start understanding a lot more about context to do the best jobs that we can in this stuff. But those two bottom ones they might seem like little footnotes. They are not. Those are central to understanding how to do any of this stuff. And to give you an idea of where we came from, this is a very old example that it just kind of shows you what we used to call the sausage making, which is we had all of these different things that we were judging all of these sentences upon and seeing whether they were judged high or low or whatever. And what we found was we couldn't predict by just designing it to work. We had to go look at all of the ways that the responses of these large language models were screwing up or not, and how they work together. Because when you have ensemble learning, what happens is you have these different learning models that are having to play together, and they don't always play well together. And understanding things from different perspectives is critical. But the different perspectives actually means that they're likely to not having the same criteria. They might actually end up competing, and then you have to think about, well, what do we do to resolve these? And so today Alphy Reflect uses ensemble learning. We have less than a dozen probably learning models in it. But you have to think hardest. Again, back with my pictures where I was talking about how those were, we had to go from that ugly guy to the inclusive one. Training data is super difficult to do, because when you're making training data, you often don't recognize your own internal biases, and you write this training data you think is correct, but actually it has all these nuances in it. It has other things in it. It has more complex thoughts than the ones you're trying to train it on. And you go back and think about it and do it and experiment with it over and over again. And I see you nodding as though maybe you have some experience with this. And then of course, adversarial networks are part of the way we train today. We don't just train positive, we train negative things. But we have to evaluate the interpretations, the performance, and rethink the classification of things as we're trying to model them. And why I think this is really interesting is because this is about what I learned, years and years ago was AI. AI is learning, representation, and reasoning. And you see us using these big AI models, these big language models everybody's so proud of, and 43 trillion utterances have been evaluated in BERT, and that's all great. And still you find yourself having to rethink the scenario and what is representation. I hope I'm not beating a dead horse. It's just, I talk so much about it because it's a painful and difficult lesson to learn. Reassembling the vote, the result after you have all these ensemble things. So there used to be something called a blackboard where we had knowledge sources that competed. And then, there's Bayesian nets that are pretty general. In almost every system today, they'll tell you they're using big data. They'll tell you that they've got it all under control, and they have multiple models voting. So perspectives matter for a lot of the best AI systems of today. And what we find is the direct matching of anything, even sentences we thought were absolutely dead ringers, it's really brittle. And what you find in a lot of the models that were made with Watson is people were encouraged to use a lot of the direct matching. And so I've taken a couple of courses that they made for nurses, and it's very difficult. So we really want to think about that example I gave earlier. So sorry I bothered you is very different from sorry for your loss. Other people's models, we get to use these beautiful models today of language, and envision there's other ones. And the question is how to build those so that we can use them as general models and then train them on our specific needs. And that's the fun today. And the real problem happens when you start using so many of them that you can't get back to the user in enough time for them to actually notice your feedback. So that's really what keeps the conversational thing working. And one-shot learning is this beautiful idea that you could just give it one example and it'll dive into this massive thing and it'll understand everything. But actually more data is valuable. So, you start getting more examples. You really want to have coverage over everything you're doing. And it's curated training and testing models. It's an iterative process. And here we are back with representation. What I find most upsetting, quite frankly, is that the AI community has not figured out how to take the representations and make them first-class citizens in this process. So people are making models, and we are depending on people that know a lot about language to make language models, or a lot about Smart Alphy to make Smart Alphy models, to make images to make image models. But those people are often at high demand, and people pay big money to get that person that really knows about radiology when they're trying to make deep learning models of X-rays. So that's really hopefully going to be another frontier that I hope AI gets. But the real take-home message that I want to bring to everybody is that it's really critical to know enough to make a comment. You can distract people very easily. And just as an example, I made a car coach that would teach you how to drive a little better. And whenever it gave negative feedback, people's errors went up. So just saying blinkers, please, was actually a bad idea. Now saying thank you for putting on the blinkers, that works. So when you're that backseat driver, remember that story. But anyway, what you want is the comments to be affirming. And why do I make the ambiguous red? I make the ambiguous red because language and communication are ambiguous by nature. They will always be. If they were absolutely perfect, then we would actually have to have the same mind. So the ambiguity allows us to shuffle around ideas and think about alternatives. And so our feedback also doesn't want to be completely directive, because we don't know exactly what a person is thinking, even if we are a perfect model of AI. Timely, short, and simple. I've kind of covered that over and over again. Non-distracting visual and auditory feedback. We try for it. There's all, there's a dangerous line between, not noticeable, doesn't do anything, and too noticeable. And and I'm not looking at the road while I'm driving. I'm not looking at the text I'm typing. So that's a really fun thing to work out. And then the question is, assistive versus advisory. So I used to teach a course for many years on the difference between assistive and advisory agents. If you give a person a fish, they get to eat this evening. If you teach a person to fish, they fish for life. And advisory agents are one that teach you to do something. And so I would rather not put words in people's mouths. I would rather that I make them come up with the text. I mean, it is useful sometimes to help a person with wording, and we do find ourselves finishing other people's sentences, and yet, we all appreciate a good listener. So it's easy to lose subtlety and stop another person from thinking. It can be disturbing, and we can lose agency and personal responsibility. And I kind of point to so many examples of where we're getting to the point where we don't try to remember things or do calculations or anything. We just depend on computers for them. When we lose personal agency, ability to take care of ourselves, we can get ourselves in a dangerous position of dependence. So I mentioned the side tone being useful. Anytime a person's trying to communicate, they need to have feedback, and we don't have it today. We don't have good side tone in email, in posting things, in text messages, and that, I believe, is one of the big reasons that we have so many problems with these silos at Facebook, at Twitter, where people get themselves into terrible places of saying things that damage them, their family, their friends. And it's interesting because a lot of people will even tell you about times when they thought they were communicating something, but they were communicating something else, and they got themselves in trouble. So I think that this feedback is something that I'm a big promoter of and believe in. And what I'm hoping is that you guys are going to find a lot of women that are interested in trying out Alphy. Alphy is more than Alphy Reflects. It's well over 1,000 pieces of content to inspire and educate people, and also to help them form a community. And it is really it has this basis of trying to focus on positive communication and affect towards each other. And we highlight, again, as I said earlier, these 4 traits that we really believe are simple enough to think about, but important enough to be productive at helping people aspire to improving their lives by improving their kindness and their bravery and their ambition and optimism. And so if you go to alphyco.com, what you're going to find is some description of all of the different facilities in Alphy. And this talk isn't about me just promoting Alphy, but I am CTO of Alphy, so I do care that it succeeds. And with that, I will just thank you for joining me for this talk and open it up for questions. Yeah. Yeah. Can you bring in a microphone? It's on. Yeah.
Since we're small, we're quite cheap.
That's a terrible.
Is it on?
Yeah, it is. Can you turn yours?
And thank you very much for this very
Can you tap the microphone? No, it is not on. Can you push here? If you hand it to me, I'll turn it on for you. There's a power.
This is better, right?
Yeah, that's much
Hi,
better.
Henrik Hoyer, Harvard University. I'm a postdoc, and I really enjoyed your talk. Thank you very much for taking the time. I have a bunch of questions, but the first one would be, since you have so many machine learning or AI models, what are the key performance indicators that you're using? What kind of metrics do you use to track your progress?
That's a fantastic question. The thing is that when you're making training data, you also may have to make testing data. And the testing data, you start off by doing ad hoc things, and then you start finding problems and putting them in tables, and pretty soon you have more and more of them. And I think that it's a really critical, it is the critical thing. I mean, without assessment, there is nothing. And the sad truth is that making the testing data is as hard as making the training data, and the testing process is as long in in fact, Henry will point out that 90% of programming is debugging, and I think this is really an example of that. But yes, that is definitely been a place that we keep learning. So what else?
But is it like accuracy or F1, or what kind of metrics are you looking at?
I'm not going to go into much more detail.
Hello, I'm Corey Kondo from Sloan School, MIT.
Okay.
And I have a quick one question. So I think the users who post or maybe engage is a kind of minority in the older community, because the majority rarely post or rarely share something and just looking at the social media. And how do you think the AI can contribute to activate this majority?
To the last sentence was a little faster.
Actually, how the AI or machine
Can
learning
contribute to what?
can contribute to activate.
Activate.
Yeah, the people who just look at.
Yeah, well, you saw that example I had where I was doing that experiment where I gave little prompts to get people to speak more. So that can happen. There's been a lot of promotion of the idea of using bots to kind of engage people. And usually those things oversell themselves. So the really question is, what motivates people to engage, right? And so we have various incentives in Alphy that we're trying to promote. We have a little bit of gamification. The idea is going to be that you get some, if you go to a talk, or if you contribute to a talk, or you create a talk for other people to come to, you get something, and then we have these points. But beyond that, there's a lot of techniques that can be considered, and the real difficulty of this idea is you can make things that are cheesy and don't actually achieve your goals. But I think that, quite frankly, what I was hoping is the thing that all of this content that we build is going to be interesting enough to people that they're going to go there, make comments, see other people's comments, respond to those comments, start making friends, and build this community. And what I love about that idea, what I love about all the content, is all this positive, supportive content creates a tone of positiveness that I think will help those kinds of communications. And so those are a variety of ways I just mentioned. I don't know if you caught them, but there's about 4 or 5 different ways that we're working on. It's something that's very much on our minds. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you have another question? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I was also thinking, now we've been in this pandemic, right? And we spend a lot of time on Zoom now, and we have a lot of tools. I don't know how many messaging apps I have on my phone, but it still doesn't feel like the real thing, right? And now you and your team, you've given this a lot of thought, and I was just, and there's probably not like the answer, but maybe just like an informed opinion on what's missing, I mean, why is it so hard to like take this, like, like the special human touch and turn that into the digital realm? Like, what's missing?
Well, there's been a lot of people try to make, avatars that interact with you, even if it's an avatar that represents another person. I don't know. I worked at Magic Leap for a while, and oh my God, those things were a mess. They were worse than nothing sometimes. And quite frankly, even video conferencing in the 80s, there was a raft of papers saying that audio conference calls were better than video conference calls. And really what was wrong is resolution and lag. And so the lag just made it completely distracting when you get outside of conversational norms of communication. So, conversational pacing, yes. Something that eggs you on, probably. How does it egg you on? Hopefully not in a way that just makes you want to be dramatic, right? And what does it do to bring other people into the conversation? We watched as Clubhouse became a fad and really drew people in. I don't know where they get the time to spend it there, but somehow they do. People respond to social opportunities. So it's what we're thinking about. It's a very important topic, and we're working as fast and hard as we can to get this thing as engaging as possible and to get more people interested in communicating with each other.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Do you have another question over here? Henry, do you have a question?
Yeah. So Ted, as you know, it's very important in user interfaces for the user to have a mental model of what the it's important for the user to have a mental model of what the interface is trying to do. So could you characterize sort of what you expect the mental model that a typical user would have of the Alphy agent? Like, to give you an example, so Siri, what's people's mental model of Siri? Well, it's kind of like the agent knows how to do a few things. It can, look up the weather. It can do a search and stuff. And then that's how I'm going to interact with it. I'm not going to have a philosophical conversation with Siri. So do you have a kind of target mental model that you're trying to get the user to believe about the agent and what it's going to do? Is it going to be the friend who gives you an encouraging word every once in a while, or what is the mental model of the agent?
So it's really a conversational assistant, in not from a semantic point of view, but you kind of feel like there's somebody listening and there's somebody that cares, and that is a big beginning to people wanting to engage. Do we want to reach further? We want to reach for the mental model being that Alphy is a platform, that there's an awful lot of ways that you can interact with the community, that there's ways that you can get something from Alphy. Alphy is there to support and advance you, separate from the content, separate from your knowledge. You're going to get some rewards. You're going to get some opportunities to get something back. You're also going to play this game. There's this game where you can find out about some fancy woman, and if you guess her name right, then you get some. So you might get a backstage pass to meet some famous author after a talk or before a talk. So the mental model is to be a simple supportive substrate that is not necessarily alive, but is responsive and proactive.
Okay.
I don't know.
Right, do we have any questions from the remote audience? Okay, if you're in the if you're in the remote audience and want to ask a question, please use the raise hand symbol so I can see you. Okay, I guess if there's no further questions, then it's 4 o'clock and we'll close out for the evening. And let's once again thank Ted.
Okay.